Okay, I'd like to call to order the April 14th meeting of the Urban Design Commission. Begin with roll call.
Mark Kimmerer. Doug Gasek.
Here.
Patrick Coleman. Hold on just. James Doherty.
Here.
Jim Sawhill.
Here.
Andrew Garcia. Patricia Joyner.
Here.
Jeff Dinwiddie. Thomas Tybor.
Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. I didn't receive any minutes in our package, so we'll move on to special order of business. Are there any disclosures this evening? Hearing and seeing none. It looks like we have the annual election of chair and vice chair. Is that correct? Okay. So what's the process? Does anybody have any nominations for chair? Is this the right sequence? I thought we just nominated a vice chair.
Yes, we do, because the code of the regulations say that annually we have to elect a chair and vice chair, even though we've just done it, so it's more a formality at this point. But yes, we do need to do both.
Okay, and then this was supposed to, okay, I see. So this has been delayed to this meeting. So we'll handle it now. So Commissioner Joyner?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Dougherty as chair.
That's been seconded by Commissioner Dinwiddie.
I'm assuming that's okay with you, James.
Do we keep doing nominations? Do I call for other nominations? Are there any other nominations at this point?
No.
If not, any objections?
No.
So, and I accept. That's fine. I'll now accept nominations for vice chair. Fill up from last time. So I'm a little bit lost at this point.
She's just recording the votes.
Okay. Commissioner Gassick?
I'll nominate Commissioner Sawhill for vice chair.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Joyner. Any other nominations? Or any objections? It's okay with you, Jim?
It's fine with me, yeah.
So that passes. Congratulations. The existing and new chair and vice chair. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I'd like to pull a case. I do that now or after?
Okay, Commissioner Gassick?
Yeah, could I pull case number 2009-151?
Okay. We have to just vote on the remainder. Okay. We have a move to approve the remainder of the consent agenda. Commissioner Joyner has moved. Commissioner Tybor is seconded. Any opposition to passing that motion? Seeing none, consent agenda passes. We'll now hear case 2009-151, which has been pulled from this consent agenda for final landscape plan review of Valley of the Moon Park. Let's see, I don't know. All right. Commissioner Gassick, would you like to give an explanation of why you pulled the case?
Yes, I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the consideration given to not use the restroom. It was said that it was due to cost, and I was just curious about what cost considerations were actually evaluated to make that determination.
Okay, do we have a representative here?
My name is Suzanne Little. I'm a senior park planner with the Department of Parks and Recreation. And the consideration is that the facility is not configured in a manner that would be safe for users. As you go into the current permanent facility, it's quite large inside. People have been there have been issues where people feel unsafe inside the restroom, where others are loitering inside. We've had people sleep inside the restroom. We just don't, it's preferred now to have single-cell restrooms where you go in and you go out, and you don't have a sort of mingling area, as it were, in a permanent restroom facility for a park. And if you look at most of the pit toilets that we were talking about last time, that's exactly how they're set up. They're an in and out thing. There isn't any space in there in which to house people or for people to, do shenanigans, whatever. With our increasing park assets and our decreasing park budget, we are hard-pressed to maintain at a decent level such permanent restroom facilities that cause a lot of additional work compared to the work that comes to the department for contracted portable toilets. Which basically, our work there is that we indicate to the service provider where the toilet needs to be placed, when it needs to be placed, when it needs to be taken away, and how often it needs to be serviced. And that's pretty much it. That's our involvement, which is about all of the maintenance personnel investment our department has chosen to have with that issue. We are a department that is slim staffed. We have more acreage of parks than most cities in the United States, and we fund we are the lowest in the number of dollars per acre that we fund our park system. So the rub, the tire has to meet the road somewhere, and in our system, our management has determined that they're not willing to invest the level of maintenance that we require to keep permanent restroom facilities safe and sanitary, and are looking at other opportunities.
So what is the cost difference between maintaining, I guess, a portable restroom facility versus a permanent one?
Well, all of the portable toilets, I think I sent I don't know if you all received it, but I sent a spreadsheet out. All of our portable toilets are contracted for about $150,000 a year. So that's all of the sites that we, and I actually don't recall the exact number that we order every year. So, we couldn't build new toilet facilities for that amount of money and maintain them for that amount of money. So it's really the least expensive way for us to go while still providing a restroom facility for the public.
Was it checked into to see how much it would cost to do maintenance for that one existing restroom facility?
I don't have that figure now. We have also, we're always exploring partnerships with neighbors, and it's possible that there may be an opportunity somewhere down the road for a partnership to develop where maintenance would be part of the partnership, but we have not accomplished that yet.
And that would be a great thing to explore. I think that was brought up at the last meeting, too.
We still have the problem of sort of misconfiguration of the current facility, which would be very expensive to solve.
Right. And public safety is a different issue, but the one presented to us in our packet was mostly a cost issue. And bringing up the public safety now is an important one and an important one to consider. That's my question.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Joyner?
I had a question on where the bur oak is. It shows it in a circle. What is that like? Or maybe Mr. Rentz knows. I couldn't tell if it's part of the paved surface or if there's soil or...
I'm Ralph Renzo, landscape architect for the project. That bur oak, that's just a concrete mowing curve around it, circular mowing curve.
How large is the circle then?
I think it's about 16,
Big?
about 12 feet diameter.
I'm glad to see a bur oak. That's a good choice when we have lots of space and helps us have more diverse species.
And they're doing well around town, so.
Yeah, and probably just a suggestion. 5 years ago, the columnar aspen were a new part of the diversity, but now they're showing up in every plan in many large quantities. So we might look for a different columnar one. Then I had another question on the. There's two trash cans. One's bear-proof and one's the regular kind, like downtown. Are those both in the park or just the?
Well, we're proposing bear-proof by the picnic shelter and then reusing the existing round ones by the playground.
Oh, so they're already there.
Yes.
I was surprised that the non-bear-proof one costs much more than the bear-proof, and especially in places like along streams. I don't know. We'd select the more costly, less efficient one. That was my only question. I think it's a wonderful plan. It's nice to see a park that's so well used get upgraded like it's being upgraded. I think people will really appreciate it.
Commissioner Dinwiddie?
I just bought a couple of these bear cans, and your cost needs to be updated. They're a lot more expensive than this now. But that's just a note. On sheet number L2, what does the heavy black line represent? Is that the fins paneling?
Is it the what?
The heavy black line, what does that represent?
Those are the existing concrete walls that are out there that we're reusing.
Okay.
That surround each piece of play equipment.
And then Patricia asked the other question I had too, so I'm good. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. It's time for a motion. Mr. Gassick?
I move to approve UDC case 2009-151 with department recommendations 1 through 3.
That's been seconded by Commissioner Dinwiddie. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'll speak to my motion. Overall, the project, I think, meets many of the requirements that UDC uses to evaluate projects, especially the policies found in the comprehensive plan. 42 and 44 is outlined in the staff report. I support the project as a whole, but I'm definitely a little bit reluctant in that support. I just want to voice that. I feel like this project, although is benefiting the park as a whole, we're taking a bit of a step back by having a permanent facility in place and now closing that down and having porta potties to take its place. I'm a little bit concerned that there is this step back as a whole. In other cases, we have the appropriate screening and porta potties by in other parks, which is a step forward because we're starting to hide them. But in this case, we have an existing facility and it's not being used, and it's being replaced with porta potties. So it definitely is a concern of mine, and I hope this doesn't continue, and I hope you continue to explore opportunities with different volunteer groups to possibly get that facility back up and running. But overall, I think it is a good project, and it has my support.
Thank you. Any other comments? I would just say that I share many of the same concerns. I do support the project. I think you've done a great job of improving the park. I guess I just have this open feeling about, or open question about, the relative frustration of having facilities that look like they're public facilities and permanent facilities, but then they're locked permanently, and whether or not it might make sense to, if there is no intention, if the configuration is flawed and dangerous for public safety, whether it might make sense to demolish the building so that it doesn't appear to be providing amenities that don't exist. But that's an open question, something to consider on the future projects, and also just an overall thing to think about of this facility and others that are in that same category that don't meet current standards for public safety. Are they sending the wrong message to park visitors? So, but I will be supporting the motion. Any opposition to passing the motion? Hearing and seeing none, motion passes. That's it for our regular agenda tonight, but we will be talking about sort of a question that the Commission wants to pose back to Anchorage Parks and Rec. We have it on our agenda as a report, just in terms of the status of this kind of a report or a message or a memo that we'd like to convey. And you're welcome to stay as we work through that. You might have some answers to important questions that we have, but you're certainly not obligated to. So. So, I guess there's no appearance requests, right? So let's move right on. We have this PowerPoint loaded onto the computer here. Did you guys all get a copy of, I made a PDF of my draft PowerPoint. Just to kind of give you a little bit of backstory on that, I did receive a lot of cost information on what the municipality pays for their maintenance and rental contracts, and it was fairly comprehensive in terms of the number of porta potties in the different parks that they're installed on, and it gives a pretty good cost picture. But armed with this information, I started thinking, well, I should sort of figure out if there's a more economical way to do this. And then I stopped myself thinking, that's not really our job as the Commission to sort of do a feasibility study on alternative designs. So in putting this PowerPoint together, I sort of structured it as, what are the kinds of things that we want to communicate to parks in terms of our concern? Do we have questions about whether or not these feasibility studies have been done? Or do we have questions about what alternatives have been looked at? Do we have direction that we want to give in terms of, do we want to make it mandatory to have permanent facilities? What is the most valuable thing that we can communicate as a Commission that could be turned into action on the part of Parks and Rec? So that's kind of how I structured this. It kind of came off as a bit of a stream of consciousness about all of the things that I have been thinking about, along with some examples of how it's been done elsewhere, which is sort of a thread that comes through this PowerPoint, is that gosh, if they've been able to figure out how to do it elsewhere, how come we can't figure out how to do it here? Are there different constraints that we're challenged with here in Anchorage? And I think Ms. Little conveyed one of those, the number of acres that we have versus the amount of funding that we have. So, armed with that kind of information, we can put more specific questions in place, such as, should we seek more funding to be on par with other facilities in comparable-sized communities in the United States, or something like that. And again, my intention is to try to be constructive, to get to the heart of how we can come up with a solution that meets our requirements as sort of stewards of urban design, while meeting all of the sort of practical requirements of the people that are trying to, make their budgets go as far as possible. So with that, I'll show you what we've got. Hopefully you guys are familiar with this. You had a chance to open it up. But the first slide is just the general question, the open question. Is this an appropriate solution for our public parks? And how do you get to an answer? Is it cost studies? Is it budget thresholds? When do you determine that a portable solution becomes a permanent solution? And what are the various trade-offs? Next slide. See if I can get this to work. It's not advancing here. There we go. So this is a little bit of background. It came to our attention a few meetings ago when we were looking at one of these park projects. That when asking the petitioner whether this is, in fact, the standard, the answer was yes. So, is this an appropriate standard? How do you determine whether it's an appropriate standard or not? This is a lot of my sort of assumptive kind of documentation. Why would you go to a non-permanent solution for restrooms? And my assumption is that it's low construction costs. We've heard that cost was an issue. Vandalism is an issue, and in this case, the vendor takes on the liability for the vandalism. The quality shelter, the permanent shelter, attracts homeless or inebriates. I think that's what you mentioned tonight in terms of a public safety issue associated with, larger spaces that are enclosed or perhaps heated. And then the maintenance, the overall ongoing maintenance cost is covered in the contract for the portable toilet. Is this sort of open question to the Commission? Is this enough issues? Do we need to really go into much more elaboration on this, as opposed, to getting into sort of the solution? It's kind of a stating the problem. How have we ended up with these porta potties as the solution? And I guess I would open this up to Ms. Little. It's like if there are more things you can put on this list to help strengthen the argument one way or another, that's the kind of feedback that we would like. Breaking it down, the low cost. In this case, the most recent cases we've seen, only the screening is permanent, so that's the only real capital cost that the project has to bear, is the cost of that screening. With regard to vandalism, as you've stated, many of the permanent facilities have been locked because of vandalism, and I guess that's a cost issue, dealing with the corrections to the vandalism. The porta potties are resilient. If you wanted to take a baseball bat to it, they'd probably hold up okay, as opposed to porcelain fixtures or something like that. And then I assume that in the maintenance contract, if anything should happen to the porta potties, then the vendor would replace it as part of their contract. The cost of vandalism damage are covered in the maintenance contract. So I'm just trying to sort of paint a sort of objective. These are reasons that the parks would cite. Low maintenance cost, the advantage of the flat rate contracted service is predictable, so it's easy to budget on a year-by-year basis. The plastic walls are quickly cleaned and sanitized, which keeps the maintenance costs low, I imagine. and then the damaged units can be swapped out. So this is just sort of elaborating on each of the original bullet points. So this gets to sort of our concerns. And mainly, the first concern is just the design options. It seems as though all of the porta potties are of a standard sort of appearance and color. And then those standard facilities don't contribute positively to the character of the parks, which is one of the things that we're looking for in our review of the designs. The screening design options that have been presented to us so far have been fairly limited in a way that the parks miss a design opportunity for a special identity. Valley of the Moon Park has the same response to toilet facilities that Jewel Lake does, for example. And I'm thinking of that picnic shelter up at the Abbott Loop ball fields. There's a real distinct sort of look and feel that could be augmented with additional outbuildings that repeat that same theme to give that place a character of its own within the municipality, so that it's special there and that the Jewel Lake facilities are special. You can certainly do that with the shelter design, but what other design elements do you have? And you really don't have that many. So you could, if you insisted on something distinctive in the screening, perhaps you could move that agenda forward. But so far, the screening has been sort of standard screening details and design.
You could have had cool rocket-shaped outhouses there.
Yeah, I mean, you could develop a theme, and I'm just sort of keeping the theme within the idea of the screening. But if you did take the next step and decide to go ahead and have custom designed outhouses instead of comfort stations that have lots of square feet and you have to heat, and they propose all these safety problems, perhaps you could solve all of the functional problems that you're able to solve with the porta potties while being able to hit some higher design ideals, and basically have this sort of win-win situation. So this is just a sort of reflection of what I was just saying. The shelters and toilets are the only constructed items that we've been reviewing. And by having the contracted outhouses, we sort of eliminate half of our opportunities for design. Screening has been functional rather than aesthetic. So, one solution is to look at standards for screening. But what I'm proposing in this presentation is that there's other alternatives for the toilets themselves, whether they're off-the-shelf building designs that have the same characteristics as the porta potties, such as the sort of the Romtech plastic octagonal type buildings, or whether they're custom designed using some of those same sort of characteristics that come from the prepackaged designs. And there's of course technical challenges related to our climate. We'd be worried about freezing if we wanted to use the facilities year-round. In the examples that I provide, all of the examples are vault toilets, vault-configured toilets, which have a larger tank capacity than the portable toilets, so they're not serviced as often. They don't need to be serviced as often. But then the trick is, how do you deal with that much sewage without it creating other nuisance problems? And the configuration that most parks have adopted is this sweet-smelling toilet technology, which uses a sort of a natural thermal siphon to create a downdraft situation or a negative pressure situation inside the toilet room, and directly vent the tank odors to the exterior. And the last bullet, most state and national parks have adopted this as a standard, and I would assume that they have the same budget constraints as Anchorage. Maybe they don't have, maybe they do have more funding per acre, but somehow they've found that this is a priority and that they're implementing it. I just wanted to give you some visuals on what the range of options are. Probably the most robust solution that I've seen are precast concrete vault toilets. Here's an example that came from the internet. It was manufactured by a company called Huff Cut. You open up their catalog, there's probably 20 standard designs that you could pick from. So from a cost of design standpoint, you're not really looking at that much if you go with a catalog type solution. There's a whole variety of different appearances that can help to complement, in each park could potentially have a different solution and be just as durable and maintenance-free as your contracted service. Here's an example of precast concrete toilets that were installed at the Toklat River in Denali, and you can see there's a whole bunch of options. These were custom designed so that they look exactly like Denali Park's wood-framed toilets with shiplap siding and board and batten siding, but it's all concrete, the roof, the walls, the floor. And in this case, it wasn't so much a vandalism concern as just extreme climate. High winds, sand, blasting effects in the river delta. But with the standard SST type configuration. And you can see if I got the mouse here, this is your typical, there's sort of like an access hatch that's lockable on the backside for access for pumping. Another option is the plastic prefab. This is the sort of the prototypical. Romtech is sort of, I think they actually own the patent on the sweet-smelling toilet technology. They have hundreds of different models, including these sort of fiberglass models that are, for all intents and purposes, they're made of the same materials as your portable toilets. They're just designed to be set on a concrete foundation that has a vault with the sweet-smelling, the stacks that directly vent to the outside. There's a variety of different porch designs. There's a variety of different building designs. Again, this is just a matter of picking it out of a catalog. I think the units cost something like $40,000 for a double, and then you'd be looking at a maintenance contract to pump. But I would guess that the pumping, because of the capacity of the tank, would be a lot less frequent than the pumping for the porta potty. And this is just different visions of that, of those sort of catalog prefab units. And again, they're used in state and national parks, and the reason they are is because they have a good cost formula for maintenance. And I would add to that and say that they have the same concerns, although each of these units is designed to be handicapped accessible, which may be, I don't know what your threshold is when you were talking about the kind of vandalism and safety issues, but each one of these sort of sweet-smelling prototypes is designed to be fully handicapped accessible. And that way you don't have to look at ratios of handicap versus non-handicap. Every one of them is handicapped. But I don't know if that is a problem or not in how you've designated. This is another example of another sweet-smelling toilet in Denali. You can see it's got the same shiplap siding and board and batten siding as those concrete ones, because all of these were developed from the same prototype. They hired an architect once to develop a kit of parts, so that depending on the region of the park that these were being built, they could have a different look and feel to complement the various landscape aspects. So this one's really built out of a wood-framed situation, but it has a sod roof instead of a metal roof that you'd see in other locations. So it's sort of one design, but it's adaptable several times. So it's kind of like not quite a prototype, and it's not quite custom. It's just variations on a theme. These are other parks, other toilets in Denali. I just happen to have a whole bunch of Denali slides of toilets in my files, so I've got lots of these things. I did a lot of work in the park, and I've taken a lot of pictures in the park, so I just happen to have it on my computer. But, here's another variation. It's a total different thing, but in this case, they've grouped. In this case, this is a rest stop where lots of people get off of buses, so it's a much bigger facility, and there's more toilet facilities that are required, and they've grouped them around a deck and a shelter area so that the whole thing becomes a design opportunity as opposed to each little building being seen as a entity of itself. It's the collection of buildings that become a larger design. And with regard to the National Park Service, they're very concerned about the aesthetics of each of their park installations. So this at Techlanica, there's, the new design will probably have, 30 toilet facilities in this one installation. This is a couple of other examples that I had just from my travels. This is in Rocky Mountain National Park, and they've got some of the same sort of seasonal issues where they wanted to have the ability to have the toilet facilities open, but then have a good way to secure them off when there's areas of deeper snow. And, to look at something like a Valley of the Moon type of installation where it's mainly a summertime kind of application, something like this helps, where you have a sheltered porch, but in the off-season, they have the ability, they have these large barn doors that close to basically close the entire porch off, so there's not a sheltered place for people to congregate and create mischief. So the whole thing just turns into one big featureless box in the wintertime, and that keeps snow from drifting and causing problems, but it has sort of a dual personality of when it's open and when it's closed. And the next slide is sort of the same sort of idea, where I think they were wrestling with some of the issues that you had brought up about the individual toilet stalls being too large in a public toilet room. So here they grouped individual toilet stalls with a hallway down the middle, and again, the hallway has these big barn doors that could be closed off when they don't want to be able to see right through the building. So there's no real floor area for mischief to occur. If you want to close the facility off, you can close it all the way off, and there's no enclosed space that can be a breeding ground for trouble. So, there's individual facilities, there's grouped facilities, but all of them, and, sort of moving back. If I go backwards, there's a different button that I hit. Oh, there we go. So each of these was responding to specific regional aesthetic requirements and requirements on functionality. Here we have a lot of deep snow at high elevations, so the base of the facility is more durable and made of stone so that it doesn't weather like the wood does. And then, so all of the facilities in this area, whether they're shelters or information boards, would follow into the aesthetic of this particular rest stop or installation. And again, from an urban design standpoint, I think that's what we're looking for, is how do you use design to create a unique sense of place at these parks that we're designing. Then there's other sort of hidden costs that don't come up in the sort of the capital cost of your solution. There's the relative, chemical hazards. What happens to the blue chemicals when they're dumped? Where do they get disposed of? Is there problems if the portable toilets are tipped over through vandalism or high winds? Is that a contamination problem? Is it not? Also, the size of the tank, the size of the holding tank, or the size of the vault will determine the frequency of dumping, which may increase or decrease the maintenance costs, depending on the number of visits to the site. We talked about weather or vandalism, tipping the toilets over. And then the overall, just the sort of life cycle return on investment. If you do build your own as opposed to contract on a yearly basis, how long does it take to amortize the investment of your own structure? And then I just wanted to include some testimony of other folks that were looking at this as an alternative. They had chemical toilets. They did the feasibility study to replace the chemical toilets with vault toilets, and they talked about the kinds of operational improvements that happened as a result. In this case, they're talking about, the ones that they were replacing they weren't handicapped accessible. The new ones were. They were able to reduce their pumping frequency because of the size of the vaults, And then they totally mitigated the spill hazards because the facilities were on permanent foundations and weren't subject to inversion. They also looked at cost savings in another park. This was their testimony of what happened as a result of installing the permanent SSTs. More reliable waste management processes, less vandalism, and, things that their maintenance staff could work on other things other than the toilets. So, that's what I've been able to gather just from just common sense and surfing the internet. And I was involved in a project at Denali Park where they were working with DEC because their sewage lagoon was reaching elevated nitrate levels, and they were able to trace that directly to the dumping of these park chemicals into their system. And they needed a way to mitigate that. And by going to the vault toilets instead of the chemical toilets, all they needed to do, and I don't want to get too much into the sort of the chemistry of poop, but it just required sort of certain bacterial microbes to be added to make that a manageable solution as opposed to chemicals. Because they weren't dealing with odor. Odor was taken care of as a matter of the design of the sweet-smelling toilet. It was more a matter of dealing with the stuff that has to be pumped to make sure it doesn't either freeze or solidify or other things like that. And the solutions by using the SST were much less hazardous to the environment than the blue chemicals of the chemical toilets. So it may not be an issue today, but as we all know with regulatory agencies, the things that don't seem harmful today could really become a big liability tomorrow. So this is our closure. Is it possible to have toilet design solutions that addresses cost and function, yet allows for a unique and appropriate design, which is kind of what we're concerned about as a commission, and also sort of force the issue? What are other jurisdictions doing to address this same issue? Why is it that we see quality facilities in other jurisdictions and not in Anchorage? And I think that what we want to make sure is that Anchorage does the best job possible within the funds that we have to make sure that our urban designs are of a quality nature. So that's all I've got. I can open it up for questions, editing. We may want to refer to this back and forth. Any comments from the commissioners? Are we asking the right questions?
Yeah. I think all the right questions are asked. You did a great job of putting it together, by the way. I think it's amazing.
Thanks. Is there anything, I sort of threw out some rhetorical should we be showing examples of, should we have some visuals in this presentation that shows examples of portable toilets, so that we clearly say, oh, that's bad and this is good. And I'm not sure of the path there because I'm not sure that everybody will agree what's bad and what's good. I just wanted to show what I thought was good. Do you think that examples of photos of porta potties would be appropriate? Yeah. Okay. We'll snap some pictures of some of the parks around town that's done this. Any other? Patricia?
I had a couple thoughts. I think Parks probably would agree with us, and as Ms. Little said there, we should be ashamed of the level at which we fund our parks compared to other places. But so I think maybe our role is to help come up with some ideas like, how do you do that? And I don't know if it's ever been part of a bond for a park. I mean, we put every kind of thing in a bond, and DOT must put their roadside ones in. I don't know if it could be part of a bond. I know they're hard to pass, but having some restrooms. I mean, we have a whole generation never seen a bathroom in a park because I don't remember when any of them have ever been opened, and I've been here a long time. So maybe we just need to have one somewhere, and people think, oh, a bathroom in a park. I mean, that you might appreciate it and think, maybe people just aren't thinking about it. You just go, and that's just what it is, and you wish that they weren't there, but people aren't even considering their alternatives, even though anybody that's traveled knows that everywhere else you go, they have them. And our state does have more money than other states. I know our city parks don't. And maybe, I was trying to think, like, parks have gotten some good facilities when we have big events, like we had the Special Olympics or something, and you get a lot of federal money. I mean, maybe we should look at things like that, the Arctic Winter Games or something, where they have money and say, well, we want some restrooms, because I think we ought to have them in the winter time. I mean, I think that's a disincentive for parents to take kids out to play or do something when you think, if they have to go to the restroom, I got to go all the way back home. And people ski and people skate, and there aren't places to go for the most part. So I think when we're encouraging people to be outside, that's a real selling point to say we could have facilities in the wintertime. Those are just
So
ideas.
if we tie this back to Title 21 objectives, or 2020 objectives, is being able to create a livable winter city. Part of that means we've got recreation opportunities in the wintertime, which means we don't have to run back home if we have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So, maybe there's a bit of that. I guess I'm trying to think of, whether or not we engage as a commission to fundraise or advocate for more budget. And that we have in the past. We've signed letters of support. Money came in and was pleading our support for an increase in maintenance budgets and things of that nature. And we have done that. But this is more of an open question about where do we set the bar? Where do we say this is a level we don't want to go below? And I'm not sure. I mean, like I say, I want to be constructive. Can we put something together that gives you ammunition to seek more funding? And in that way, we're helping the situation. And I don't know. I mean, what are the right words to use to get that kind of action? Commissioner Sawhill.
Mr. Chairman, there we go. I think one of the important components I think we should move towards permanent facilities. I think we need to encourage the municipality and the Parks Department to move in that direction. I would like to see them develop some standard designs that they would use. I think that would probably be the initial step. But I think another important criteria is the volume of use the park gets. We should be targeting our high-use parks as the appropriate place where we want these to go. I would almost like to see a standard. If a park has so many visitors per year, then it should have permanent facilities. And when they come in to improve that park, it should be part of their basic design criteria. We have design criteria for parks, basic amenities. If a park gets certain use, we provide a number of parking spaces for that use. And it's a basic need to have restroom facilities. And in the high use, we should have permanent quality facilities. I don't think we have to spend a lot of money to do it. I think some of your examples are very cost-effective and probably just as easy to maintain. I think they could get similar costs from their contractors to maintain quality, serviceable restrooms.
But in terms of our communication to parks, we should put that in as a recommendation that they move towards permanent facilities at a threshold of users.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have the tools to say what that threshold should be, but maybe action for them to come back to us would be to develop what they think are reasonable thresholds when we would insist on permanent facilities. Because, I mean, we can have a situation, I had a design project a few years ago where the state DEC was insisting we provide permanent toilets. And the owner said, well, I don't have money to do permanent toilets. There was no relief to him that he had no money. It was the law. I don't want to get into a situation where we're advocating to make it the law to do something that's very difficult to finance. But at some point, we have to establish these standards. And I guess I can modify this in terms of action that we'd like to see. And one of those action items would be to see some sort of disciplined move towards toilet facilities and a threshold of park use that would dictate a mandatory permanent toilet facility. Okay? Other comments?
I just wonder if the Park Commission has a role, and if maybe our recommendations go to Parks, and then they take that to the Park Commission, or we somehow share ideas to see if they would support that being a standard, or I'm not sure what their role is, but it seems like they're coming to play at some point.
Well, I don't think our role is to sort of say this is the answer or this is the solution. I think we want to sort of clearly frame the problem that we see.
Yeah.
And act to facilitate discussion towards a solution. But I don't even know if this commission should say what the solution should be. Or I think we just need to bring it to a higher level of awareness so that we can say, this is what we'd like to see. And, one of the things that's missing is if we do deliver something like this and say, we'd like to see this, what's the consequence of not, or we're going to reject your next park project? I mean, I don't know if that's even constructive, but...
I'm just thinking of making it more people aware of it besides just us. We'll talk about it and come up with some good ideas, and then if it doesn't leave the room, it hasn't accomplished anything. So not as a regulatory role, but as an informational role. You did a lot of work on it. We've talked about it, that at least recommendations or ideas or statements of the problem go to Parks and maybe a wider audience.
So who would be best to advocate this as action to the parks? Do you think that's something the Parks Commission would carry that message? I don't know. I think this message could be carried from Urban Design Commission because this is something that's a city issue. It's a design issue.
That we go directly to Parks, maybe?
Well, I don't know if we go directly to Parks. I think our basic charter is to inform the mayor. Isn't that kind of so we'd go through the city somehow and it would get routed through channels. I don't know.
You could be invited.
Invited?
Invited to speak, yeah, by the Parks and Rec Commission or the Parks Department to make your presentation.
Okay. Yeah, because that's the other thing. It's like, okay, let's say we craft this and we say, okay, this is perfect. What form does it take to get delivered to an audience? How do we get what we want to have happen? What do you think is the most effective way of?
I've been making presentations before you speak at the Park. I think that would be good. People who are directors there, our foundation.
I have to stop you so that I invite you to speak in the microphone.
Oh, I can't.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
I could arrange for an invitation for a presentation at the Parks and Rec Commission. The Park Foundation attends, department director is there, the park commissioners are there. That might be a very appropriate audience.
Does that feel appropriate? It sounds like it's a lot of the people that we want to be communicating with. When is the next? When do you think? How often do they meet? And
we meet on the third Thursday, I believe. Is that right?
Next Thursday?
This is the second Thursday. I'll get it to you.
So I think that would be pretty effective as long as we had a presentation that we could sort of agree has the right stuff in it. This doesn't, as it is right now, doesn't leave. There isn't a lot of tangible action in it. But I think Commissioner Sawhill's comments could start to put some teeth in it. Basically at this point, I just want to raise awareness and sort of get people to ask. It's like, do we have standards? Do we want standards? Other comments, input? Okay, well,
do have one thing I was just thinking about a little bit, and some of the issues outlined with permanent facilities. It might be worthwhile to actually show how either the porta potties are able to overcome those deficiencies or are not. Because I think some of those issues like homelessness and vandalism are still issues with porta potties. And we might be able to show that and demonstrate that those issues don't go away with the installation of porta potties versus permanent facilities. The problem still exists. They're just solved in different ways.
Okay.
And maybe we can email you with ideas we have. Like, I think we should include the idea that none of these are year-round. I don't think they're just seasonal, and some might. I think you did a good job of stating the problem and the pros and cons and all the facts, and maybe we just need some suggested solutions, and that could be a range of things, and then some what Doug mentioned, and maybe other things we think of later that are pros and cons, and I'm sure they'll ask for cost, and we have those from Parks, so we'd probably want to have those.
Okay. So I'm kind of thinking that there's going to be this, with the additional photos of bad examples of porta potties, with the recommendations that we're coming up with, if there's another sort of generation of draft that I'd like you guys to see before we make any presentations to anybody. I mean, is there anybody else? Should planning bless this, or is there an approval process before we? Or are we just free to do whatever we want?
I would think if you get an invitation, then that's good enough.
Okay. Anything else?
I think it'd be interesting to show some comparison of the cost, because I think that's one of the biggest issues behind this whole thing. Why it. There's a public safety concern. There are other considerations, but ultimately, there's such a limited amount of money, and if there can be some sort of a financial comparison, hey, this is look at these other jurisdictions, this is possible, and they're under similar financial constraints. How are they doing it? Being able to show that it's not unaffordable necessarily, that other places are able to afford. How are they able to afford it? Is it because they have more money, or is it because there's something else there?
Well, and that's kind of what I was suggesting. I was given a lot of the cost figures on this, and that's sort of when I started working on this, I thought, I'm not in a position to do a feasibility study on behalf of the city. All I can do is say, have you done it, or you should do it, or something, so that I'm not saying that, hey, this is only $30,000, you should easily be able to afford it. It's not really my place to tell you what you should be able to afford and what you can't. I just want to make sure that we've looked at the alternatives. I mean, in today's case, the reason that we cited for not using the permanent facilities was cost, but then in the explanation, it really wasn't cost at all. And I just want to kind of get through all of that to get to the priority. It's not because it costs too much, because cost is relative. It's that other things are a higher priority than a well-designed toilet. And I think we're just suggesting that we need this priority to be a little bit higher to meet our community standards. I think, and the reason we have a cross-section of folks here is that we're supposed to represent the community. Is this ridiculous? Does the community not care about this? Or I think the community does care. So we've got to find a way to pay for it. So it's pretty easy for me to, I'll just take some extra pictures and add a slide or two and make another PDF and circulate it. And if I can get some sort of read from the commission that, yeah, this is what we talked about, then we'll be ready. if you could extend the invite, let us know when the meetings are. Hopefully, we'll have something ready to go when that time comes. It may not be this month, maybe it's next month, but, it's not like a super pressing urgency, but I don't want to review another park project and have to have the same exact discussion. Anything else on this matter or any other? We'll have a motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry.
If we've finished with this porta potty discussion, I had something else to let the commission know about, and it's kind of good news. The Title 21 is nearing completion, or there's light at the end of the tunnel. Chapter 7, which was the commercial design standards, was approved last night at the Assembly. So the only chapter left to approve is Chapter 14, which is simply the definitions. And other than that, there are quite a lot of follow-up items that were left sort of towards the end of this process for the Assembly to deal with. But it's very close to being finished at this point, and so they're looking at probably a third quarter of this year, wrapping it up and have it approved at that time. Dylan Coffey is now a municipal employee, and he will be assisting in getting Title 21 finalized, and he now has an office in our building that's being prepared for him. So he'll soon be taking residence in there. And that's all I had.
Well, I guess that is good news.
So is it, it's approved and it's done, or it's approved and it goes to the administration?
Nearly. Only Chapter 14, which is the definitions, that one still has to go through the approval process, but that's a simpler process than all the other chapters that have gone before it. And then just a long list of things that still need to be addressed that they pushed, to the end when they couldn't make a decision about something. They pushed a lot of those kind of decisions to the end, so they have to go through all of those, and then it should be done.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah.
So what changes are there to this board's responsibility in the new Title 21?
I think, it may be a little premature to say, but the responsibilities will be growing. You may have, more of the commercial development to look at that wasn't part of your responsibilities previously, so that may be happening.
As I understand it, that any appeals to design standards will be decided by this board.
It was also my understanding that we would see a lot more of the conditional use site plan approval that P&Z currently does.
I don't know about conditional uses, but certainly site plans, yes. Yeah. The more commercial, big box kind of developments, yeah.
Okay. Now a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Dinwiddie has moved. Somebody second. Commissioner Gassick, thank you. We're adjourned. Thank you. Do I just leave this on or?